Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on, the guru to the liberal stars, Ten Trippa, joins us. But first, you know him, you love him, you might have even voted for him, Representative Mike Coffman. Thanks for being here. I'm glad you guys are off.
Thanks for having me, I appreciate it.
I'm curious, all right, before we get into all the other stuff. Working with Trump, I mean, you've worked against Obama.
Sure.
You work with Trump. You've come out against Trump. You've spoken against Trump. You've had ads distancing yourself from Trump.
Right.
You've met him. Tell me. I mean, I've never had the guy. First of all, what's the hair like?
Weird. I think it's it's a color not found in nature. But I think I've met with him in a small group in the what's called the Roosevelt Room, which is his conference room just outside the Oval Office. And I would tell you what, I think he came across very positively, very engaging, very commanding, very charismatic. I've also been with him behind closed doors in a larger group. And in a larger groups, then if he's very different. He shouts, he does this with his hands.
It's huge.
It's huge, but 9-day difference between being a member of Congress and a Republican in the Obama administration versus the Trump administration. I think that from my standpoint, being in the Armed Services Committee and being on the Veterans Committee, from those two committee standpoints, very positive. You've got General Mattis as the Secretary of Defense, retired General of the United States Marine Corps, incredible, and very positive. And then also in the VA. I mean, President Obama never really would challenge the VA, never really fought for reforming the VA. He always was saying things were better, and they really never were. And now we have a secretary who's backed by the White House to do reforms for the purpose of cleaning up the VA, to make sure that we honor our obligations to the men and women who've made tremendous sacrifices for this country. That's very positive.
Let me ask you about my frustration, and my frustration with Republicans. You and I have talked about this a million times. All right, here we have this huge wave. We've got this great disruptor in chief who wants to do things, and we keep running into Congress, and nothing, at least from the outside, nothing seems to happen.
Sure.
It took forever to get a health care bill out of Congress, knowing that when it went to the Senate, it would all get destroyed anyway. We're not seeing any movement. At least I'm not seeing any movement on taxes, and we don't have that much time. The midterms are going to come, and midterms are usually pretty bad for whoever's in power of the presidency. Is my image right that Republicans just aren't working together?
Well, I think a couple of things. I think, first of all, the health care bill needs to be broken up. I think that there are things in there that were never in the Affordable Care Act to begin with. I mean, we talk about, for instance, on Medicaid, and we need, the Medicaid expansion part definitely needs to be reformed, changed. But it went way beyond that, and you saw the protests in Senator Gardner's office by the disabled community. That was never in the ACA. That is an additional reform that was pulled in. My gosh, the ACA is big enough as it is. Why do things, why take in skilled nursing? Why take in the disabled? Why take in these other Medicaid programs? Let's deal with the Medicaid expansion piece. So I think that, quite frankly, I think that there could be bipartisan agreement on the health insurance part, the insurance exchanges that are failing. I think that there could be bipartisan support and should be to fix that part, and I think that should be pulled out.
Am I right to say that inside the Republican Party there's this debate of fixing Obamacare, that is trying to make it work but still try to keep everyone covered, versus the more purist point, which is scrap the whole thing and then let's rebuild it? Is that the basics of
Well, I think the question
fights?
is what does repeal and replace mean? I mean, I think that if they covered pre-existing conditions, if we repeal and replace, that means can we do that? Well, I think that's a ridiculous discussion. Let me tell you, outside the Beltway, what the average American cares about: what did you do to my health insurance? What did you do to broaden access? What did you do to lower costs to health insurance? That's what they care about. They don't care about an ideological discussion of repeal and replace. I think that's important. I think we need to repeal and replace. There are some in Washington that said, let's repeal and let's come around later on and replace. Well, you don't understand the economics of insurance markets, and that is when you create uncertainty, then you're going to aggravate prices further beyond where they are now.
Will something come out this year?
Oh, something has to come out. I mean, the fact is that these, I think something has to be done in Medicaid expansion. In terms of looking at the cost of that program. In terms of what the federal share is, I mean, the average Medicaid program, let's take disabled, or let's take skilled nursing, or let's take children, is 50% federal, 50% state in terms of the responsibility. Here under the Affordable Care Act, the Medicaid expansion piece, able-bodied individuals up to 138% of the poverty line, without dependent children, it's going to level out at 90% federal, 10% state. So how is it that the federal government is willing to spend 90% on an able-bodied person, albeit and without a work requirement?
Yeah, I want to make sure I understand this. I have a son who's disabled. He's on Medicaid.
Right.
I understand this. I understand people who need it. The idea that here in Colorado, 1 out of 4 people are now getting Medicaid, able-bodied people, and you're telling me that when it comes to this, the feds are giving 90% of that to an able-bodied person and only 50% to folks like my son.
Yeah, able-bodied person without dependent children.
Right.
I mean, that's without a work requirement. I mean, that's incredible. And so we need to transition that on to a 50-50, just like any other Medicaid program, and there ought to be a work requirement. Somebody ought to be affirmatively moving themselves to self-sufficiency.
Just read a report in Georgia on food stamps, the SNAP program. They required either that you have a job, only able-bodied childless people either have a job or go to training to get a job. And within the first 5 months this year, the rolls dropped by 85%. 85%. All right. Something's going to come out. Is this your Mike Coffman guarantee that I can take it to the back?
I mean, that has to change, and we've got to change these insurance exchanges. When they have no carriers are leaving, when they have no carriers in a given area, the program just stops. All the subsidies under the Affordable Care Act to individuals buying private insurance flow through these health insurance exchanges. Connecticut will be the first state now, an entire state, without any carriers applying to be on it next year. 73,000 will lose their insurance.
Is it political suicide just to do nothing and let Obamacare crater, because that's the only direction it's going?
No, simply because of the fact that then you're not going to deal with the Medicaid expansion piece, and that's why I want to break up the bill. Let's break it up. Let's have that health insurance piece. I think we can have bipartisan support for that because of the fact that it is failing, that it is cratering. So let's come together as Republicans and Democrats and fix that piece. We're not going to. The cold reality is Democrats are not going to help on the Medicaid expansion. What I want to do there, let's use budget reconciliation for that. That only requires a simple majority in the House and the Senate. And then tax reform, unfortunately, I don't see a bipartisan agreement there. I think we have to use budget reconciliation for tax reform.
But, let me jump on tax reform. I thought Steve Moore from Heritage, formerly Wall Street Journal, suggested, and I think Art Laffer both suggested, first thing out of the box, Congress ought to redo business taxes. We've got the highest tax rate for business taxes in the developed world. We've got regulations. Cut those taxes down right off the bat, spur economic growth by doing that, and something that even Democrats understand it has to happen. Congress went in a different direction, which was let's look at the whole tax world and go to individual income tax. And it seems like they can't do that until they do health care first. So it's been...
I don't think so. So you have to, unfortunately, deal with, through the budget reconciliation process, in terms of the taxes under the Affordable Care Act, you would have to deal with those simultaneously with health care reform, because the savings from shifting federal responsibility that I mentioned would then help you eliminate some of the taxes under the Affordable Care Act. But I think it's still a mistake. I mean, still that's small potatoes compared to the rest of tax reform that in terms of pro-growth, stimulating the economy, creating jobs. that the average American person, the average American can relate to.
I want to ask you about your district, because your district was drawn not for you.
Right.
It was drawn very specifically to get you out of the 6th congressional district. And you've had some big, big challengers, but every year you seem to do better. Every other year, you seem to do better at keeping this job. I don't know why you want this job. I don't know why anybody wants this job.
Right.
So if you told me right, Hillary Clinton won by 9 percentage points in your district. You won by 9 percentage
About
points.
8.5, right.
All right, so yeah, that's a huge swing in both directions. You've done some interesting things. I think you're one of the hardest working men in show business because you've got to keep it. Why is it you're elected in a district that is not there for you?
You know, one thing I do is it is a very diverse, obviously the most diverse district in the state, Aurora, Colorado.
Yeah, and you're a stuffy white guy.
Yeah, a stuffy white guy. So what I do, I'm doing a Spanish talk radio show in Spanish tomorrow. I'm a weekly guest on the show. And I work a lot of the very close relationship to a lot of the immigrant groups who tend to register as Democrats simply because they think that Republicans don't like them, that Republicans are not simply anti-illegal immigration, but they're anti-immigrant. And so my getting in there, working with them, breaks that narrative, and it makes a big difference.
We've only got about a minute left. Talk to me a little bit about the character of those immigrants in Aurora, in your district. You know, a lot of them remind me so much of what my ancestors were. You know, they're coming here, they want a better life. I'm not talking about the people who are here illegally, and I can understand the tensions, but what is the character of those people? Oh,
they tend to be more faith-based than the average American. That their faith, whether it's a temple or it's a church or it's a mosque, tends to be the center of their community, a center of their life. They do tend to be hardworking. They're very aspirational to for the American dream, and believe strongly in the education of their children.
So if they were not playing identity politics, would they be Republicans?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the vast majority would. And that's what's so strange about this particular equation. But it creates a great opportunity for me.
Mike, always good seeing you.
Good seeing you.
Stay tuned.